The spoon clinked against the porcelain cup, and the sound felt louder than it should have, like it was warning me to listen. My name is Evelyn Harper. I'm 42. When did love turn into something that needed watching instead of trusting? I stood alone in the kitchen, early morning light sliding across the marble counter, staring at the tea I had just poured for my husband. Steam curled upward, soft and innocent. Too innocent. The house was quiet in that way rich homes get when they're pretending nothing is wrong. No voices. No footsteps. Just silence sitting heavy in the air. My husband was still asleep upstairs. Lately, sleep was the only time his face looked peaceful. During the day his hands shook. His skin had lost its color. Doctors called it stress. His family nodded along, tight smiles, eyes never reaching mine. I opened the cabinet where his medications were kept. The bottles looked ordinary. Clean labels. Perfectly organized. But when I held one in my palm it felt wrong. Too light. Like it had been waiting for me. A strange thought crossed my mind then, quiet and unwelcome. The house wasn't protecting him. It was closing in. I placed the bottle back carefully as if it could hear me and realized something that made my chest ache. Peace isn't something you marry into. It's something you learn to defend. I waited until he left for his morning walk before I returned to the cabinet. Each pill bottle now seemed like a puzzle piece scattered across a table, and I intended to put them together. I lined them up, comparing labels, dosages, and expiration dates. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the realization of how carefully this had been done. Single label was wrong. One tiny difference that no one else would notice. The medication wasn't toxic enough to kill quickly, just enough to make it look like a slow, natural decline. Someone wanted him gone and they wanted it to seem ordinary. I could feel their intentions in the walls of the house, in the way the morning light didn't reach certain corners, in the hollow silence of breakfast where his mother once smiled. They smirked behind closed doors, believing no one else would see. Instead of confronting them, I started quietly documenting everything. Dates, doses, changes in his health. I photographed the bottles, kept careful notes, and memorized their movements. Every dinner, every whispered phone call, every casual, "How's he feeling?" was recorded in my mind. I realized then that love sometimes isn't about rescue, it's about vigilance. And I would protect him. Not with words. Not with anger. But with patience and a plan that would outlive their greed. Evenings became the hardest. The house seemed to breathe around me, each creak of the floorboards a reminder of eyes that weren't really seeing. I watched him sit in the living room, hands folded, staring at the muted television, unaware of how close danger lurked in plain sight. His trust made my chest tighten, but it also gave me purpose. I started tracing every delivery, every prescription refill, every small touchpoint his family had with him. Patterns emerged, subtle but consistent. A neighbor mentioned seeing his cousin linger by the pharmacy window. His sister volunteered to pick up groceries, just to help. Every gesture was calculated. Every smile hid a motive. I began leaving small accidental notes in his purse and jacket, reminders of meetings with his doctors and the exact time to take certain medications. No one noticed, but I did. My quiet corrections built a shield around him. Fragile, invisible, but real. Then one night I found the first undeniable proof. A prescription label tucked between the pages of a magazine, rewritten with a handwriting that wasn't his. My heart stopped. I held it close, the paper trembling, thinking about how close we had come to losing him. Sometimes the most dangerous enemies hide in family photos and shared holidays. And sometimes, the only way to fight them is to become the quiet shadow that protects, waiting for the right moment to strike. Days bled into nights as I became a ghost in my own home, moving silently, observing without being seen. Every conversation, every laugh at dinner, every clink of silverware against plates became data. I memorized voices, footsteps, even the way they leaned into each other during casual talks about his health. One evening, I overheard a conversation that made my stomach twist. His brother, speaking low so he thought no one could hear. "If he keeps lingering, the will stays intact. We can't afford mistakes." The word will cut through me like ice. They weren't just trying to make him ill. They were counting the days until he was gone, until they could claim everything. I didn't panic. Panic would have made me visible. Instead, I smiled softly behind closed doors, imagining their surprise when their plans unraveled. I began collecting physical proof, Photographs, receipts, labels, notes. Every tiny misstep they made was now a thread I could pull. The house felt different at night. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It held secrets and I had them all. I realized then that revenge didn't need to be loud. It could be quiet. It could be invisible. And it could be absolute. Sometimes, protecting someone isn't about fighting with fists. It's about outliving the deceit, letting truth do the damage quietly, patiently. He never suspected me. He smiled, trusting, unaware of the web being spun around him, or the shield I had woven in silence. Every morning I handed him his pills, double-checking dosages, masking my fear behind soft words and gentle touches. He rested his hand over mine once, murmured, "You're always looking out for me, aren't you?" I nodded, swallowing a lump in my throat. I couldn't tell him the full truth, not yet. I began to notice cracks in their facade. Little mistakes, forgotten phone calls, extra receipts lying around. Their smirks faltered when I entered the room, subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to tell me they knew something was off. I let them believe I was oblivious. That was my advantage. Late one night I placed hidden cameras in strategic spots. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted proof. Every whisper, every subtle attempt to poison him further. It all went on record. My pulse thrummed in the quiet as I watched their plan unravel before my eyes, without them even realizing it. By then I understood something profound. Sometimes survival itself is the strongest revenge. Protecting him, exposing them quietly, letting the truth speak at the perfect moment. That would be enough. The night before the family dinner, I sat alone in the study, reviewing everything I had gathered. Files, photos, receipts, video clips. All evidence of their greed and betrayal. My husband's health had stabilized, thanks to careful oversight and subtle course corrections. He still thought it was luck. I let him. He didn't need the weight of knowing how close he had come to losing everything, or everyone. I placed a single candle on the mantel, its flame flickering like a heartbeat. I imagined the dinner tomorrow, their confident smiles, their quiet scheming, thinking the house still belonged to them. I rehearsed my calm, measured delivery, the way I would reveal the truth without shouting, without anger, letting the evidence speak louder than any words. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity. I had turned fear into vigilance, vigilance into strategy, and strategy into quiet power. I realized revenge didn't have to be dramatic to be devastating. Sometimes the smallest movements, the most patient planning, yielded the most unforgettable results. I whispered into the darkness, almost to myself, "Tomorrow everything changes." And for the first time in months I slept without dread, knowing I held the leverage that could free him and punish them. The dining room was perfect, glittering under the chandelier, silverware aligned like soldiers, and the air thick with polite smiles and barely concealed ambition. I poured the wine, my hands steady, my mind sharper than ever. Every chair was filled with someone who had plotted against him, unaware that I was holding all the threads. Dinner began casually, small talk and laughter floating over the table. Then, as my husband sipped his wine, I reached into my clutch and pressed play on a discreet device. Screens around the room lit up. Videos, photos, documents. Proof of their schemes, their whispered plans, their attempts to make his death appear natural. The room froze. Forks hovered mid-air. Eyes darted, jaws tightened, and for the first time, they realized the quiet woman they'd underestimated had been watching, recording, waiting. My husband looked at me, confused, and I just smiled softly, my calm voice slicing through the tension. "I think it's time the truth comes out." Whispers turned to stammers. Smirks fell. Their plans dissolved in the weight of undeniable evidence. For months they had thought they could control fate. That night they understood that fate had another player. One who had been invisible all along but never powerless. The air was thick with silence, broken only by shaky breaths and the soft clatter of abandoned cutlery. My husband stared at the evidence, then at me, comprehension dawning in his eyes. No anger. No panic. Just relief. He reached for my hand and I squeezed it gently. He was safe, truly safe for the first time in months. Their faces were pale, their confidence shattered. His family tried to speak, but the words stumbled, meaningless against the truth displayed for all to see. The will was already updated, every greedy hand cut off, every lie exposed. They had thought they could manipulate life and death, but the quiet patience of love and vigilance had outsmarted them all. I realized then that survival itself had been my most profound revenge. Not violence. Not confrontation. Just the steady, unyielding force of truth and protection. The house, once filled with hidden threats, now breathed relief, calm, and an unexpected warmth. As I watched them leave, defeated and silent, I understood. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers in the shadows, and when it steps into the light, it is absolute. I sat beside him, letting the candle flicker between us, a symbol of endurance, love, and justice realized. And in that quiet victory, I felt a peace that was earned, not given.